Hey everybody, this is Eric Mishi, Executive Director of SAVE, Suicide Awareness Voices of Education. It is Friday, and we've already been at it this morning having some credible conversations as it relates to the impact and importance of guardrails on social media when it comes to the issue of how do we make those safe places for young people and really safe places for all of us. This entire week has been filled with amazing discussions with folks from all over the country where we've talked about issues that are important to mental health. How do we help prevent suicide? How do we raise awareness around suicide? And what organizations are doing all across the country to be involved in this effort to protect our mental health and to help prevent suicide. We've had conversations with people related to veteran suicide prevention. We've talked to folks about the rural economy and the impact of the rural economy on rural suicide rates and mental illness. We talked to folks who are suicide loss survivors who shared with us how they've turned their grief into hope by getting involved in projects and programs and events, as well as social peer support groups to help provide support for other suicide loss survivors. This morning, we started our conversations with the Senior Tech Policy Advisor to Senator Richard Blumenthal, Democrat from Connecticut, Colin Anderson. Senator Blumenthal, along with Tennessee United States Senator Marsha Blackburn, Republican, were the lead authors on a piece of legislation called the Kids Online Safety Act. We'll talk a little bit about that with our next guests here, but we're also going to want to talk about this overarching theme of social media and why young people are really the ones out there leading this discussion and this debate about how do we make sure that these platforms that are out there and ubiquitous are as safe as possible while ensuring that young people have access to these resources that really have become part of their DNA. So with that, I would like to welcome Arielle Geismar and Zamaan Qureshi from Design It For Us with us this morning. Good morning, Arielle and Zamaan. How are you doing today?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Great. So where are you both? Where am I both getting you at? What part of the country are you at today?
I'm in Washington, D.C.
I'm also in Washington, D.C.
All right. Well, I'm in Minnesota. So you guys are East Coast. We're in the middle of the country. So let's start, Arielle, with you. Tell us a little bit about you, kind of your background. What do you do today? And then Zamaan, we're going to come right back to you on the same question.
Sure. Hi, everyone. It's really good to meet you all virtually. My name is Arielle Geismar. I'm the co-chair of Design It For Us. We're a youth nonprofit focused on being the epicenter for youth policy around technology and data and privacy. My background is in student social justice organizing. So I started when I was in high school, organizing young people around issues that I'm passionate about, everywhere from gun violence prevention to women's rights to LGBTQ plus rights. As I graduated high school, I lost a very close friend to suicide, and so turned my attention towards mental health in particular. As I did so, I noticed all the activism work that I was doing online has a direct correlation with the digital world, right? What happens online and offline are no longer different. As I did this, I realized that mental health online is one of the most important things. And in 2020, I started doing technology policy work and have been here ever since. It's really great to meet you all, and I'm looking forward to a great conversation. Zamaan?
Really great to meet you all. Thank you so much for jumping on this virtual stream. Eric, thank you so much for having us and elevating our voices. Arielle hit the nail on the head about what we do and why it's important what we do. My name is Zamaan Qureshi, co-chair Design It For Us. I'm from the suburbs of Chicago and really got into this space more because of the impact of social media on our democracies and our elections. But when I saw the Facebook whistleblower Frances Haugen's disclosures to both the SEC and to the media about the harm that Instagram was doing to young people, and the fact that executives at the company knew, it was a real wake-up call for me as somebody who was already working in technology policy, to bring together youth activists in this space to coalesce around the ideas that we think are important and we think are valuable. We've seen horrible cases over the past couple of years related to eating disorder, mental health, and suicide. And investigators in the cases have been able to track back social media as being either a purveyor or a cause of those harms. So it's really important, the work that we do. We are the guinea pig generation that have grown up on social media. Social media has been experimented on us. And so it's incumbent on us, unfortunately, because our lawmakers have been unable to step up, because the technology companies have been unable to adhere to their responsibility, that we share our voice. And that's what Design It For Us is, and that's why we were formed.
Well, I appreciate you both making those introductions and sharing a little bit about your entry into this conversation. And so, let's kind of dive right into this. You mentioned, Zamaan, that your generation is the guinea pig generation as it relates to big tech, whether it's a social media platform or a technology platform, electronic platform of some kind. So share with people, when you say that, a little bit more about what that means. Because, my generation, I grew up, technology for us was Pong, Atari Pong, which was a game that, basically was two white lines and a dot going back and forth. And then it graduated to arcade games video games at the mall. And so, in my capstone, with technology as it relates to, that kind of technology advancement was an old boxy Nintendo game that I had years ago. Different type of evolution. And so share with us a little bit more. What do you mean by that idea that your generation become the guinea pigs for social media and big tech?
Yeah, really good question. I mean, I think it kind of underpins a lot of the way that our generation has been raised on these platforms. So if we kind of take a step back, Arielle and I are kind of the older members of Gen Z, if you will. We were the first to get ourselves on social media. And when we did, social media looked very different than it is today. Instagram, believe it or not, used to be a fully chronological feed. There were no stories, there were no DMs. You just liked and you commented, and you interacted with your friends. And for the most part, that service, that platform was pretty benign. Snapchat was, I think, established in a way to at least create close communications and contacts with friends. And there was no TikTok. And so now we fast forward to 2024, and these platforms have gotten very, very good at hyper targeting us with certain kinds of content and advertising. We've done away with the concept of chronological feed as a default in social media. Instead, it is these predictive algorithms that are making predictions on what content you are going to engage with the most. So that can be really good if you're searching for, recipe videos, places to travel to, or if you're invested in a kind of educational topic. But it can be really harmful when you have to think about when you're in such a vulnerable place with your mental health, as you're developing as a young person in this completely new environment, and having to navigate the social pressures of what it means to be in middle school and high school. So by the guinea pig generation, I mean that we're the first to receive these algorithms in a way that has been so hyper targeted to us. But unlike many adults, it's very difficult for young people to modulate and understand the ways in which these algorithms are impacting us. So as we've kind of experienced that for the first time, it has been a real challenge for many young people. And now it's kind of just become ubiquitous. We've accepted this as the status quo. And the reason that we founded Design It For Us is to try and change what we believe can be a better status quo, can improve on what has been left for us, essentially.
And so, Arielle, I want to kind of follow up on that, because I think most people's assumption would be that, given this generation, your generation, social media, those platforms are kind of part of your DNA, right? In a lot of ways, and most people, the immediate kind of knee-jerk reaction would be, well, young people are going to be the first people that are going to object and push back against any kind of effort to put guardrails or regulate these platforms. How do you respond to that in a way that can help people understand why it is you're doing the work that you're doing?
Right. That's a great question. Part of it is not viewing it as one or the other, right? Social media is not a zero-sum game. There are wonderful things that happen on social media. Like Zamaan was saying, if you're looking for recipes, if you're looking to get involved in a social cause, if you're looking for travel tips, social media isn't all inherently bad. And we recognize that, right? We can say that young people enjoy our time online, while also saying we won't be standing up to predatory algorithms. What we're not doing is we're not saying you can't go on social media or you shouldn't be on social media or everything that, right, like creating a zero-sum game. What we're saying is that when we're on social media, it's the responsibility of these platforms to be protecting us and to design their features in a way that doesn't inherently harm our mental health. Things like erasing the time in the top left corner so you can't see what time it is, having an endless scroll so you're constantly viewing this kind of content. We're not saying that young people don't want to be on social media. We're not saying that young people don't sometimes enjoy social media. We are saying that there are regulations that need to be put in place and a responsibility that needs to be put on these companies when they're creating features that are adversely impacting us.
So in to kind of piggyback on that, so we'll jump to COSA a little bit, Kids Online Safety Act and that legislation, and Design It For Us and has really been out front in advocating for passage of this legislation. Legislation that big tech and critics of the bill call nothing more than well-intentioned censorship. That this is a backdoor way of shutting down content that people don't want people to see and things like that. How do you respond to that? And then how do you respond to that, but what are your thoughts on why a piece of legislation like COSA is anything but a censorship bill?
Yeah, happy to start. I mean, you're absolutely right. You laid out exactly what the tech companies' arguments have been from the beginning on this piece of legislation. And without getting too much into the sort of constitutional weeds of this, it's sort of this absolutist First Amendment approach that the technology companies have taken to really safeguard themselves, to safeguard their own design features, and to protect their bottom line. So we know that based on regulation that's happened in Europe and in the United Kingdom, that design feature-based intervention and regulation works. We've seen it with the UK's age-appropriate design code, which produced over 91 technology companies changes in their design features, their algorithms, their systems to comply with that legislation, which we know makes it safer for young people on social media. So that's kind of the starter. I think as well, technology companies are really afraid of regulation because it means that it harms their status quo, their incumbent status as the main players on the scene. And any regulation that they have to contend with means that they might have to tweak their algorithms in a way, might have to tweak their design features in a way that end up impacting their bottom line, even marginally. But I think what we have seen is that if we can introduce design-based regulation and legislation, we get around a lot of the free speech and content-based concerns. I agree with the premise that they're coming from, that the government should not be deciding which pieces of content are served to us. That is not a world that I think anyone wants to be living in. But what we do have to recognize is that the companies are deciding every single day what pieces of content we are being served. And there's absolutely no guardrails, there's no regulation on how they go about doing that. So forget about the what for a minute, put that aside. It's the how that we're focused on. And that's the underpinnings of COSA and this design-based legislation. And what the duty of care portion of the bill really underscores is that technology companies need to have requirements to build their products to be safer for young people, recognizing that there's a different experience when young people are using social media versus adults.
And again, kind of jumping on that, Arielle, in that there is a difference between how adults access and use the internet versus youth. And when we're talking about youth, I mean, we're talking not just youth who are teenagers or young adults, but we're also talking about 10 and 11 and 12 and 13-year-old kids here, right? And so the what they see and how they see it and how often they see it has an impact on their mental health, and certainly, as we know, has an impact on suicidal ideation and suicide, because we've heard that from parents themselves time and time again who've lost due to their engagement and activity on social media. So how do you reinforce with people that, again, we're not trying to stop people from having access to social media, because there are some benefits here, but this idea that it should be this unregulated kind of Wild West doesn't serve anybody's purposes.
Right. And it's saying just that, right? I can speak to my own experiences as a young person online. I was, I think I got my first Instagram when I was like maybe 11, maybe 12. And immediately within months, I was fed content that was encouraging me to engage in disordered eating habits. As a young woman who's growing up in this world, that's the last thing that you want your kids to see. And so Zamaan absolutely hit the nail on the head. It's not about anyone regulating what can and can't be on social media. It's about introducing common sense design regulations that really make these platforms safer. Zamaan talked about, these other bills in other countries, both in the EU and the UK. These companies have done these design features, and it's worth noting that they haven't implemented them in the United States. It's not because they can't do it. It's not because they want to do it. It's because they know that if they do it, it'll hurt their bottom line. If these companies were truly capable of self-regulation, we would have seen a lot more evidence of that by now. One of the things that Design for Us has also done is work to pass the age-appropriate design codes in multiple states. Right, so we worked in Maryland, we worked in Vermont, we worked in California. And this piece of legislation also targets the actual design of these platforms. Big tech has time and time again employed their lobbyists to try to fight it, as we've seen in California. But we also know that young people have done a really good job of creating networks and actually addressing it. When we were doing work in the States, big tech was saying, well, we can't have different legislation from state to state. That's going to be too difficult for us. And then we go to federal, and then they say, well, that's too difficult too. So I think the question is, what isn't too difficult for big technology to do? And I think the answer is maybe anything. And that's why we are coming in and making these decisions for them.
Yeah, in Minnesota, we had an age-appropriate design code act called the Minnesota Kids Code. And again, piece of legislation had broad bipartisan support, was not about blocking content, really was about design, right? Was making sure that you when you create a product, that you keep kids in mind in terms of their mental health and their safety, that you set the privacy features to the highest levels possible by default, so that you don't have to have kids having to set that, right? And so that you create a safe place for young people to be on social media, which are all things that big tech is fully capable of doing. One of the things that I think any of us who've been involved in this conversation over the last couple of years, and certainly the 200 plus organizations that are part of the coalition to pass COSA, find absolutely remarkable is big tech, which has not only all of this money, but all of this technological know-how, who comes back time and time again and says, well, you know what, you can either give people unfettered access to this, or you can make it safe, but you can't have both. And it's clearly not true, is it?
Yeah, that's correct.
It's not true, and I want to piggyback on something that Arielle just said as well. Is that, you know, if the technology companies could be trusted, maybe we would have an easier time trusting them on engaging on legislation. But they don't even enforce their own policies. So when they come in and express these opinions about the First Amendment running into their ability to serve as a business, you know, we don't have any trust in them because they have not acted in a way that's reflective of having the user, having people in mind as their best interests, and instead it always seems to be their bottom line. And I think, you know, the age appropriate design code that push has shown that, a kids code. I think we've also seen it now with the state AG lawsuit against Meta, is that we know that that executives had the opportunities to implement design-based interventions that they knew would work, that they knew would improve the mental health and well-being of young people on their platform, but chose not to do that. Things like hiding like counts by default, like preventing strangers from messaging with one another, even just giving young people more autonomy over creating their online experience. So that's on them. They chose not to implement those safeguards, and now we're pursuing regulation because they have not, to impose those requirements on them.
Yeah, it's an interesting, you know, I've often spoken about the kind of uncanny parallel between big tech today and big tobacco of my generation. Big tobacco for decades and decades and decades deflected this idea that there was a great public health harm associated with their products, despite the fact that, you know, after the government and others came in and sued them, there were mountains full of documents that showed that they had the data, that they had their own experts saying, you know, cigarette smoking kills people, the stuff that we're putting into these products addicts people, and yet time and time again they lied to the American public saying, you know, this isn't dangerous, and in fact, you know, took out ads that talked about, you know, what a great social experience it was if everybody smoked cigarettes, and you know, smoking helps with digestion and it helps you with focus, and you know, they paid athletes a lot of money to smoke cigarettes while they were throwing footballs around, and today, you know, it's almost as if Mark Zuckerberg kind of snuck into big tobacco's warehouse of secrets and dusted off that playbook and said, hey, we can just slap big tech on big tobacco and kind of do the same thing. And we're seeing that in the army of lobbyists that they employ on a local, state, and federal level. We see that with the money that they spread around to a lot of organizations, mental health groups, public advocacy groups, to try to kind of put get us to look at that shiny object, that they're great, you know, participants in the community, that aren't they great, while at the same time they're cranking out products every single day that they know, based on their own data, based on their own experts, are causing significant harm to the youth of America, and really not just youth, but really everybody. And they do have the ability to change that, but they don't want to because obviously it costs them money. So we're at a place now where in Congress, the United States Senate passed the Kids Online Safety Act with a 91-3 extraordinarily bipartisan vote. And frankly, had, as Colin mentioned, had the folks that were absent for that vote been added into that had probably been closer to 96 votes in favor of that bill. Pretty unprecedented in today's environment, kind of a unicorn piece of legislation. It's now in the House. And so what do we need people to know about this bill in the House? And if they want to get involved with this and they want to see this bill become law, what are the things that you want them to know that they need to be doing?
So I'm currently actually sitting in the House of Representatives basement right now doing this call. So it's a great question. Each of you listening at home have a member of Congress that represents your district, and each of them has the power to get this bill over the line. Everyone has the ability to use their own lived experience, whether you're a young person or a parent who's seen a young person with a lived experience. Call up their member of Congress and advocate for what they believe in. What I believe is that the House should move very quickly over these next couple of weeks to bring COSA to a vote. And ultimately, that's what I believe that we have power to be able to do. So I look forward to getting that over the line, and I think we're very close. And everyone has the ability to have a positive impact on this.
Yeah, and I put on the screen here, what you got to do if you want to find out who your House member is, go to house.gov, and you can Google this, and there's a link there that you can put in your zip code and find out who your elected House member is. And Arielle, do those kind of conversations matter? I mean, do House members actually listen to these emails or read these emails? Do they listen to these calls? How important is it for people to get out there and be heard?
Absolutely, they do. When folks are elected to Congress, they represent us. And when we say this is an important piece of legislation I want you to pass, it is their job, it is their responsibility to listen. So we are absolutely doing this. It is absolutely making a difference. I just dropped the Design It For Us link in the chat if you're interested in taking action with us. But just as you were talking about earlier, right? You're right. This is kind of like big tobacco, which is why there are young people who are here right now who are making impactful change about it. So these representatives are absolutely listening to us, and we would love for you to join our work and to contact your own representative about COSA.
Yeah, and I spent 35 years of my previous life in local, state, and national government and politics and public policy, and I will tell you that people's voices absolutely matter. They make a difference, and any change in this country, whatever the issue is, doesn't happen unless people are willing to kind of get out there and get involved and to make a difference and have their voice be heard. And so as Arielle and Zamaan have shared with us, is that the work that they're doing is work that you can get involved with. If you're somebody who feels as though you want your voice added to this conversation, whether it's Kids Online Safety Act or it's other age-appropriate design code bills, I've got their website up here. You can reach out to them. So as we kind of come to the end of this half-hour conversation, what is it you want policymakers to know from your perspective as young people that are out there leading this public conversation about making sure that we do no harm to your ability to benefit from social media, while at the same time not allowing that social media experience to do you harm?
I think the first thing, right, is knowing that young people are organizing, we're passionate, and we're more than capable of having our own seat at the table. A lot of times as we talk about young people and digital policy online, it's important to be including us, right? We say nothing about us without us. And so to the policymakers, knowing that young people are here, we're equipped and we're informed to have these conversations and to really move the needle on this. We have a really large movement behind us of young people that care about this issue, and we're here to mobilize about it.
Well, I will say this. It's been a long, long time since I first got involved in government and politics and advocacy and trying to change the world. And I have often said that your generation is the next greatest generation in America, that you're stepping up, that you're not just being seen, you're being heard, and you're making sure that your concerns are being found. I will say that on behalf of SAVE and the work that we do for suicide awareness and suicide prevention, we are enormously grateful for your leadership, for your willingness to step up, to get out there, to be heard, to take this fight and to be willing to lead this fight. And so I appreciate the opportunity to visit with you both today. Look forward to continuing to work with you as we try to get the Kids Online Safety Act passed. And I know that you will continue to be the leaders that this country needs now more than ever before on this and other issues. So thank you both, Arielle and Zamaan, for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much, Eric.
Have a great day.
You too. Take care.
Bye-bye.